Leave it to January to throw out some disappointing sequels to really good movies. So the first disappointing sequel this year was Woman in Black 2. But even far more disappointing is Taken 3. Now, I really like the first Taken movie. It's probably one of my favorite 2009 films, right below District 9. So when the second one came out, I was pumped. I was eager. I was ready to see another Taken movie. Unfortunately, the second Taken movie ended up being very disappointing, and it wasn't until after the movie was done that I realized it was a totally different director, which makes sense. So when I heard they were making Taken 3 and I heard rumors that it was the first director again, I was super excited. Unfortunately, the day before we went to Taken 3, I found out that it was the second director again. And I grew sad. Very sad. Now I have to say, Taken 3 isn't as big of a disappointment as the second film, and I like it better than the second film. But then again, I had low expectations, and that's probably why I wasn't as disappointed as I was for the second one. So this time around, no one is actually taken in Taken 3. Instead, his ex-wife, after starting to fall in love with him again, ends up dying, and Liam Neeson is framed for it. So now, while avoiding the cops, Liam Neeson is trying to figure out who killed his ex-wife, why they did it, and take revenge, and protect his daughter at the same time. And a lot of people are hating this film because it has a similar main premise as The Fugitive, which, yeah, it does, but here's the thing. If you strip away all the details and all the things that make a film unique in its own right, then you're going to find that the main premise is pretty similar to a whole bunch of other movies. It ends up being the characters, the details, and the plot points that make a movie its own movie. And for the most part, Taken 3 does feel like its own movie, even though the main premise is The Fugitive. It still has its own characters from all the other Taken movies, and it still makes it feel like it's part of the Taken franchise, even though no one is really taken. Well, I guess in a way someone is taken. His ex-wife's life is taken, and his daughter gets kidnapped towards the very end of the movie, so she's taken. So I guess it's still a Taken film? I still liked and cared about the characters in this film, but then again, it could be just because they were so well established in the first film, and this is a third film of the series, so maybe it's just because of that, but it still helps the movie. Plus, the chemistry with Liam Neeson and Famke Janssen was very good, and I felt believable that his ex-wife was falling in love with him again, which gives us an extra emotional attachment when she ends up dying, so that was good for the film as well. I still like the characters, but some of the new ones were a little bit more stereotypical and a little more bland, such as the villain, which is your stereotypical Russian bad guy. Now, the fighting sequences weren't that bad. However, it's still the type of fighting sequences with many cuts and many different camera angles, and it gets hectic and crazy, but maybe it's just me getting used to that kind of action sequences, but I didn't get confused, and I felt like I was following the fight well enough to the point where it was acceptable and it was exciting at some moments. Keep in mind though, it is that type, so if you don't like that type of fighting sequences, then it's still a bad fighting sequence. But as far as those types go, it was a little bit more competent and a little bit better than usual. The same cannot be said for the chase sequences, however. Just like the fight scenes, the chase sequences have multiple cuts, but unfortunately, it feels like no one knew how to do a successful chase scene in this movie. Every stereotypical thing you can think of in a chase sequence is in each of these chase sequences, so there is no originality to it. I still wouldn't mind that if it was still a good chase sequence, but it's cut up to the point where those stereotypical things are all you see. For example, the first chase sequence is Liam Neeson getting chased by the cops while he's on foot, and it's all the kind of things you'd expect. He goes through a person's house, he jumps over a fence, he does the running on the roof scenes. There's a cop chasing him on foot while there's cops in the car chasing as well. It's just all those things you'd seen 100 different times in totally different movies. However, it's cut to the point where it's like that's all you see. You know, you don't see him get from this stereotypical thing to this stereotypical thing. Instead, it just cuts. It's like, let's only show the important things, cut it, and let's cut out all the running from this place to this place to this place. Instead, you see him get to this place, then this place, then you get to it. You don't see him running the whole way, and it's really weird. It's like the chase scene has very little running in it. It's so weird. And that's the same with the car chase sequences. There's this one point where he's being chased by the cops, and so he'll turn, then he'll cut to his next turn, but you don't see him driving on the road to that turn. It's like, we'll cut. It was so frantic. There was this one part in the chase scene where you see like 4 or 5 turns right away, and you don't see what happened between those turns. It's so weird. And it's just crazy. There's simply no good chase scenes in this movie, and there's like 3 frickin' chase scenes. Also, the current husband of Liam Neeson's ex-wife in this movie, he's played by a different actor, like completely different actor. It's still the same character, even though he acts like a totally different character for reasons I won't discuss because it happens to deal with the whole twist of the movie. But yeah, it's a totally different actor, so don't be confused. I was confused when it showed him again, and I was like, who is this guy? And then it says, oh, and he finally says Stewart's name, and I'm like, oh, this is the current husband of the ex-wife. Oh, gotcha. Totally different actor with a totally different accent. It was so weird. That was weird too, but it makes sense if you watch the whole movie. Then it just makes sense. Now, the worst part of this movie is there's moments where Liam Neeson, there's no way he could escape this place. There's no way he can get out of this. And it clearly, okay, he just died. And then suddenly you see him safe. And it's... Alright, let me explain. There's this one scene where he's being chased by the cops in this parking garage. And so he gets to the very top. He has no way out, so he backs the car down into this elevator shaft. The car, with him still in it, falls down this elevator shaft and hits the bottom, and gas starts to leak. You don't see any elevator doors. You don't see any way of him being able to get out of this alive. Suddenly a spark happens, the fuel lights up, and the whole elevator shaft explodes. I mean, almost the entire half of this building goes up in flames, and you just see it just blows up. Next thing you know, the detective searching for Liam Neeson gets a phone call. He answers it, and sure enough, it's Liam Neeson suddenly outside on a payphone calling the detective. How did you get out of that elevator shaft? Is there something I'm completely missing? Because I didn't even see you get out of the car. I didn't see any possible way of getting out of that elevator shaft. Now, if this was a mindless action movie, then yeah, this is kind of acceptable, even though it's stupid. But the problem is, it happens like 4 times throughout this movie. There's like 4 times throughout this whole movie where there's no possible way Liam Neeson could get out of this or I don't even know how Liam Neeson got to this one place in the first place, and it doesn't explain, doesn't show you, and the last time it happens, it tries to explain it in this half-assed sort of way, but in the end, it doesn't make any sense. So ultimately, Taken 3 is a disappointment, and there's a reason why it's a January movie, but at the same time, I still ultimately like the story and the characters, and I still liked it better than number 2. It wasn't as disappointing, probably because I had lower expectations going into Taken 3. But I'm going to have to give it 2 stars. So, if you've seen Taken 3, what did you think about it? Go ahead and comment. If you haven't seen Taken 3, what is your favorite Liam Neeson action movie? And I don't mean him as a supporting role. I mean a Liam Neeson main character action movie. So sorry, Batman Begins does not count because he's just a villain and he's not even the main character. Again, this was Bruce Gifford, and this is Just My Opinion.